Thank you, everybody, for tuning in to Coder Conversations. If you want to catch up on any previous episode, visit us at www.coderconvos.com. I'm your host, Kevin, and I'm with.
Brian Russick, professional drummer, drum teacher based out of the Suffolk County, Long Island, New York area. If you'd like to book a lesson with me, I can be found on the web at brianrussick.com.
And today's guest is Reshma Crawford, a writer and producer for National Geographic, Hulu, and much, much more. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, hopefully I
Thanks.
pronounced your
Yeah.
name correctly.
Yes, you did. I give you kudos for getting it right the first time. Good job.
Nice. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Of course. I'm glad you all are having these sorts of conversations, and I would love to just see what we talk about tonight. Sounds exciting.
Absolutely.
Awesome. So, yeah, just to get things started, you're a writer and a producer, and you've worked at a wide variety of pretty big companies. So, can you give us a little bit about your background?
Sure. Basically, my professional life has consisted of 9+ years, going on a decade in October, actually, where I've worked in nonfiction TV. And so in that time, I've done stuff for natural history shows, lifestyle shows, military, education, and mostly recently true crime, which is actually my bread and butter. It's my favorite thing I've done. I don't know what that says about me as a human being, but it's probably the favorite sort of stuff that I've made before. And I'm originally from the DC area, and I worked at a company in the DC area, mainly doing natural history stuff because in DC you've got Smithsonian, you've got Nat Geo, you've got Discovery. So that's how I worked on a lot of these natural history shows through this production company. And since moving out here to California, I've been working at another company, and that's where they do a lot more lifetime history channel sort of stuff, and you get a lot of true crime in there. So that is a very broad spectrum of what I have done in my professional life. Basically, if you give me a task, I have probably done it. The only two things I have never done are balance a budget and write a full script, hour-long script from start to finish. But that does not mean I've never written before. I have an MFA in screenwriting, and I've been writing basically since I learned how to do that when I was a very, very, very small child. So
Oh, wow.
that's
Awesome.
me. That's me in a nutshell.
Awesome. So you mentioned California. Whereabouts are we talking? SoCal?
Yeah, SoCal, Los Angeles.
Awesome.
Been here for 3.5 years, and my husband and I finally feel like we understand it. It took that long for us
It
to
takes a
understand it.
while. Yeah, I was there for
Yeah.
10 years.
Oh my goodness. Yep. It's a journey. It's
There's no place
very
like it though. There
That
really
is
is
very true.
truly no place like it.
I am a tried and true East Coaster, like I said, DC area, and so it's kind of been a bit of a culture shock, honestly, coming out
Yeah.
here. It's just so different than what I expect. Things move a little slower. It's a lot sunnier.
People show up late
Yeah.
constantly.
And like that's probably good for someone like me who's very type A, who's like need to like rush and do things right now. It reminds me to like be patient and take my time. But also the East Coaster in me is sometimes like, okay, we can go a little faster on this. Come on now. But no,
Yeah.
it's got a cool vibe. We're in a very nice area that's pretty chill for the most part. And like, yes, LA, you have to drive a car, but where we live, you can actually walk a fair bit and like get to a lot of different places, which is really helpful for us. So yeah, 3.5 years going on 4 in January, and we like it out here. It's fun.
Awesome.
So, yeah, you mentioned
Mhm.
nonfiction. What made you go that route versus fiction?
Mainly because the when I was still in the DC area, there wasn't much I could find in the scripted realm. So through a happenstance of many circumstances, I actually was put in touch with this woman named Molly Rupert, who I actually don't know if she is still alive or not. It was a lovely older woman who like knew everything about the art scene in the DC area. And she told me about a number of production companies that she had heard of or that she had had people work at. And one of them was where I first got my start in October of 2015 as a production intern. More like a development intern. Like I learned how to research for topics on shows. I was casting for shows, kind of writing pitch decks and things like that, pitching to people at the production company. So if not for her putting me in touch with these people and encouraging me to like do an internship with them, I would not have gotten to work there. And then from there, I ended up working at the place I worked at for 5.5 years. And then it all is like a domino effect, basically. I did not plan to work in unscripted television. It was not like I was not like jazzed as a little kid being like, yeah, I really want to write shows about animals and natural history and true crime and murders. I didn't do that, but the
Yeah.
storytelling aspect is all there still. Like they call it unscripted, it's still very scripted, and I don't mean that in a derogatory way. I mean that in the sense of you know what you're trying to get when you go out to film ahead of time generally, but then it's kind of a little harder because you have all this footage that you've gotten from the production side of things. Then you have to really kind of puzzle piece it together to make a story, and especially if you have a multi-episode series, you've got to make that all fit together across multiple episodes. So, in that sense, it's very different from a TV show where you're writing it and then you film it. It's like the complete opposite in that sense. Like I said, my MFA is in screenwriting, so that helped me with a background in being able to write and craft a story altogether. Um, and I would like to work in the scripted side of stuff. It just didn't work out at that point in time. But like, if someone offered me a job in scripted stuff, I would like not hesitate to say yes and be like, yeah, let's do it. I would be curious to work on that side of things for sure.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I mean, a lot of entertainers that we have on, actors, musicians, they usually say something similar to the extent of, my career has been non-linear. It's
Mhm.
not just one thing connects to the A to B real smoothly. It's usually more, okay, I got this great opportunity, then nothing for 6 months. Then I
Exactly.
get this great opportunity again, and then nothing for a year. So, I mean, has that been your experience?
Yes and no. I have been what many people have called a permalancer throughout the majority of my career in this industry. Right now is actually I the longest I have been without work of not of my own choice, I guess you could say. Between mid 2021 to mid 2022 was the longest time I wasn't working in this industry, but that was mainly because my husband had just come from the UK and immigrated here. We were moving to California, and that took a lot to do, and then we moved and then had to, like, get adjusted to living here. Um, so that was kind of like I took a break of my own volition. Right now, I'm kind of in the same boat as a lot of people in the industry right now that I'm sure you've talked to, but it's kind of a messy time period for TV and film and all of that. Stuff is moving away from LA. There's the whole thing with AI. The money's just not there. Streamers are not taking as much of a punt on a lot of stuff. And like it's a bunch of factors coming all together. So I'm keeping the faith that I can get a job hopefully within the next few months, but um yeah, it's until this summer I was pretty working pretty steadily, I would say. And I'm very grateful for that. I know a lot of people who that's not always the case for them.
Yeah, we've heard similar things from other writers that the industry is struggling a bit. Um, so, like, how do you survive once like these jobs aren't coming in? You just like work other jobs, or
Um, have a lot of savings. That helps first off. No. I mean
Yeah.
that honestly that does help. I mean, this is the first time, and this is not like a thing that like I'm ashamed of, but it's the first time I've done it. I'm on unemployment for the first time, and that's a thing that a lot of people in this industry do when they're between jobs. So that's a new experience for me doing that. But also I'm not like just sitting on my laurels or just taking the time like sitting on the couch eating bonbons or playing video games. Like I am actively applying to several jobs like in the meantime.
Yeah.
I'm waiting to see if my previous place of employment has a job that maybe I could start in the fall. I'm reaching out to all sorts of other people in my field who I just have contacts with, or seeing if they have contacts to other production companies. Looking at Staff Me Up and seeing what sort of positions are on there. Maybe they're going to be paying less than what I'm used to, or maybe they're not exactly what I've been doing for my job, but maybe they're kind of similar. So I can kind of apply and feel like, all right, I'm not just like applying to something that is totally out of pocket. Um, what I don't want to do, if at all possible, is try and do something that is just so far away from what I've been doing. In terms of, and this is not to like say that this is like a bad thing to do, or like people who do this are like failing or giving up or anything. I've done the thing where I've had to do like just the retail job or the working at a theme park job just to make ends meet, and honestly, it felt really demoralizing a little bit, unfortunately. It honestly was hard just because I'm such a creative person, and to work in such a corporate environment was a little like stripping myself of my independence. And like that's one thing, like I am a team player, I'm collaborative, I like working with other people, but once you start implementing a bunch of rules to just make it work in a corporate environment, that's where I start to lose it a little bit, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm the same way. I've worked for people. I used to work in insurance sales,
Mhm.
did health insurance, life insurance. Worked independently, and I worked for some brokers, and I've always had a hard time working for people.
Mhm.
And I think I get it from my dad. My dad had his own business, so I always saw how whatever he wanted to do, he did. So to see that growing up, I think I've kind of implemented that in my own life. I really like to do my own thing and not have a boss, hanging over my head.
Absolutely. I can kind of relate to that too. My parents are, they're both self-employed. My mother is a veterinarian in the DC area. She has her own practice, has done for 26 years, I think, at this point. And my dad is a professional drummer, which is why I find it funny that you are too a drummer,
Oh, wow.
Brian.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
So, and yeah, and he's been like gigging and doing drums for 40 plus years, I want to say, at this point. Like it's got to be 40, 45 years at this point. He was touring all throughout the 80s, and then once I was born and they moved to the DC area for like to be for permanency, he's been teaching lessons, he's taught at colleges, he's like a local drum player around that area, and since COVID he's become a board game designer too. So it's like I grew up in a family of like very go getting, if you want to do something, just go do it sort of people. And I think that that was very
Yeah.
helpful for me. I said when I was 2 years old to them, like, I want to be an artist. And they basically said, cool, you probably have more chance to becoming president than you do at being an artist who's successful. And they didn't say that to like, they didn't say
Yeah.
that to detract me or to say like you shouldn't do this. Like they were very encouraging. They just wanted me to realize up front like it's still going to be a really hard slog in many ways. Like you still have to work really hard. There's no guarantee of anything, but like we'll support you 100% of the way. And like they put up with all of my creative antics. Like I acted, I've sung, I've drawn, I've done movies and written and all sorts of stuff when I was a kid. So like I didn't go down the route of like law or medicine or economics or international stuff like a lot of my colleagues and family members did around my age.
Yeah, and for me, when I moved, I'm from Bridgeport, Connecticut, just across the
Okay.
water from Long Island, where I'm in now. I'm in Long Island because I have family here. But when I moved out west at 22, I didn't really know anyone. I moved out with a band. We were a small fish in a big sea. And I just started booking shows and, going that route. And then the group ended up breaking up within a year, which was devastating.
Mhm.
But then it ended up, kinda, God closes one door but opens a window.
Mhm.
Pretty much then I become a session musician. I'm sure you know what that is.
Absolutely,
Became
yeah.
a session drummer, and I've kinda done that on and off. I've taught on and off, but it's really yeah, anything in the arts, it's tough, like you're saying, it's not gonna be linear. It's not gonna be, "Okay, amazing opportunity right after another amazing opportunity." I mean, some people are lucky. Some people will
Mhm.
make it with a band straight out of high school, like a Green Day, a Blink 182, bands like that, but most of us are not lucky, and we end up having to find our own way, basically.
Absolutely. Yeah. And as a thing my dad always says is that it's either feast or famine. You either have like nothing happening and there's like no calls, no nothing from anyone, or you have the opposite problem. You have too many choices and now you have to pick like what do you think is the best one for this moment in time. Um,
Exactly.
and I've definitely experienced that. Both are stressful. I don't like making decisions. And
Yeah.
I also don't like feeling like I'm just not doing enough. And I always have to be reminded. My husband is good at reminding me of this, like, you're doing a lot. Like, you're not just sitting here. You're actively reaching out to people. For this time around of unemployment, I've been literally like making a list of every person I've reached out to and like what the reaction or the result of that was. And it's been a lot. Like, I've been actively trying to search for whatever my next project would be since the end of April before I even finished on my last project. Because I always just like knowing ahead of time, what am I going to be looking forward to? What do I have to work forward to? And at the same time, while I have this kind of downtime, I'm also working on what I would like to have as a second career of being an author. So I'm taking the time to work on various manuscripts that I'm writing and making sure that, hey, if I want to pursue this, I'm not just doing like one thing. I want to be doing all of the things because I'm insane and I'm crazy and I like doing more than one thing at once.
I mean, to me, it sounds like you're very analytical. Would you say that's true?
That is true. Yes. um, I, I,
Nice.
I'm probably organized to a fault. I definitely have like 5 million to-do lists. I'm definitely the person who will like put very detailed information in emails to make sure it is crystal clear what is happening and when. And I try and like, I don't know, for me, I've just found it helps me to organize my life in that sort of way, knowing like, all right, if we have this on the calendar, we got to do it this day, or we got to like tackle this, or like go through these things. So honestly, I would be at a loss if I didn't have my life organized in that way because there's too much in my brain to keep track of it all.
Yeah.
So, yeah, what were some of your favorite projects that you worked on?
The last one I worked on, which I will shamelessly plug right now because it just came out like 2 weeks ago, was the Ted Bundy dialogue with the devil. Like we've seen 5 million Ted Bundy shows. What makes this one interesting is that it's not just about Ted Bundy and his horrendous crimes. It's about him being in prison and being interviewed on 13 hours of like unreleased footage or recordings, talking to Detective Robert Keppel, who basically was having him tell him stuff to get into the mind of a serial killer because after Bundy was the Green River Killer in the same Washington state area, who was killing all of these women all over the area. I think he ended up being the second most prolific serial killer in the country. And they just could not find him. They could not catch him. They did not have any clues whatsoever, and they were getting very frustrated. Ted Bundy wrote to their task force saying, I will talk to you about this because I think I have insight that might help you. It basically inspired Silence of the Lambs, if you've seen that movie or read the book. So
Yeah. Wow.
it's yeah, and it was a very interesting thing to work on because I actually was not as familiar with, again, Ted Bundy's horrendous crimes. I will not go into details here. They're very graphic and very sad, and they've also been talked about to death. But what I really liked was we did focus a lot on the victims, which I think often gets kind of drowned out a lot in these conversations whenever we talk about any true crime or murders or anything like that. We really made a point to talk about the law enforcement who were working on these cases and the victims and their families and kind of their reactions to these things like decades later. Like, even though a lot of these took place in the 70s or 80s, it still is just as raw and as open a wound as it was back then for a lot of these people. And just honestly hearing Ted Bundy speak on these recordings was both very creepy in the sense of it's creepy hearing a serial killer who has done a lot to a lot of horrible things, but also just hearing how, yes, he was a very well-spoken person. Like, he does have a lot of interesting insights that ultimately were kind of used to catch the Green River Killer when he was eventually caught like 15 years later. So that was very interesting. Another series, kind of a twofer series that I worked on was I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Gypsy Rose Blanchard case at all.
Not too much, if you don't mind explaining that.
Yeah, so it's a very convoluted, sad story, but basically, Gypsy Rose Blanchard was a woman who believed she was not a woman, that she was just like a girl under the age of 18, and told that she had all of these various ailments like leukemia, And all of she was wheelchair bound. She had all of these medicines she was on. She had had multiple surgeries. And her mother was the one taking care of her. Um, her mother ends up being found dead one day, basically. And Gypsy Rose, is nowhere to be found. It turns out her mother had faked all of her illnesses. She was not sick whatsoever. Gypsy Rose Blanchard was not sick at all. And she had figured this out and basically realized, I'm not going to survive if I am still under the care of my mother for much longer, because she's ramping up all of these surgeries and all of these medications to the point where, like, it's going to do something horrible to me. So the only way out she saw at the time was basically to not have her mother be alive anymore. And so she was found eventually. People were shocked that she was not sick. They were shocked that she could walk, that she was not dying like they had been told she was for years. She was not like under the age of 18. She was like 23, I think, when they found her. She ended up serving time in prison, and where I come into the story is we did a show called The Prison Confessions of Gypsy Rose Blanchard, which was basically an overview of her life, but also her reflecting on her time being in prison. She ended up serving 8.5 years um, in prison for the crime that she committed. And we did a follow-up series called Gypsy Rose Life After Lockup, which is when she got out and she was on parole for a year and a half afterwards. And kind of, how do you have this person who's like 31 at this point and she's never really lived in the world? Like, she's obviously like existed as a human being, but she wasn't allowed to go outside. She wasn't allowed to make friends, dress in any way that like was how she wanted to dress, watch anything, do anything. She didn't even really know social media or like phones or most technology in many ways. So watching her kind of come out of prison after all of this horrible stuff that she went through and then suddenly make a life for herself, that was very, again, it was very disturbing in many ways, just because it's like, this is very weird watching this woman go through this, but also very hopeful because she does come out the other end. And of course there's drama. Of course there's all sorts of other stuff that are happening that like she has to deal with. But um we also included a lot of social media on that show, in terms of people were very into this story of hers and like had many opinions on this, of like, well, she's like a hero versus, oh, she made up all of this that happened to her, like her mother's the real victim in this. So it was very interesting being in a show that was kind of in the public zeitgeist at the time. I remember at the time being like, there's so many news articles about her being let out of prison. This is really weird. I'm not used to doing a show. I'm used to doing shows about animals and sharks and like murders that happened a while ago, not things that are like currently happening. So
Right, right.
that was an interesting experience. That was actually probably the hardest experience I've ever had working on a TV show, period. Just because I'm not used to that sort of attention. And everyone kept messaging me being like, oh my goodness, like you're working on this show about her and like she's in the news and you're kind of in the news inadvertently. And I'm like, yeah, that's weird. I'm not used to this.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it just sounds like you're utilizing many different skill sets here.
Yes, for sure. I don't believe that anything that we ever really do is wasted. Every experience we have, whether it's good, bad, or neutral, um, comes in handy at some point or another, usually in ways that you don't expect. And it might not be immediate. It might be like years down the road, that you realize, hey, actually, this skill that I developed years ago in this job that had nothing to do with what I'm doing right now actually is transferable and works for what I'm doing at this moment in time. So 100%, like, yeah, like every skill you have.
100%. Yeah,
Yeah.
100%.
So what does a typical day look like on one of these projects? Are you mostly researching or writing, or what exactly are you doing on a day-to-day basis?
Um, there is no real typical day. And that's I hate when people give that answer, but like it really kind of is true in my case. So, I actually work from home. The great thing about where I've been working is that we're all spread out over the country in many ways. So we're working with people like not only just in SoCal, but in like New York, in DC, like, and the last project I was working on with people in Canada. So it was like we were all spread out all over the place. And a typical day, I will be assisting producers. I will be doing research if they have like a need of like, hey, can you find out exactly the date of this thing? Or hey, can you make a timeline of, for example, like Ted Bundy's legal proceedings, like when he was arrested, when he was tried for this crime, when was he given the death sentence, stuff like that. Um, Sometimes I will help with stringing out edits in Avid. We use Avid as our editing software. And I've actually that's a skill I've had to learn on the job. I knew nothing about working with Avid before doing all of this in the industry. And now I'm like, I can kind of do it, not like proficiently to the point of like an editor. But if I need to string out something and make it so that a producer can work with it and kind of write their script from it, I can do that. I've helped with writing outlines. I've helped with doing other research for outlines, and I don't know. It's just it's literally like I am the person you go to when it's like, hey, we need something done. Let's just give it to Reshma. She probably knows what she's doing, or she can figure it out really quickly. So it's a lot of communication. Like even though we're working remotely, it is a lot of messaging back and forth and being like, "Hey, do you have a second to just hop on a call?" Or, "Hey, do you have a second to like just chat through this thing because I'm confused and I don't know what I'm doing or I don't know where to find this thing." And despite the miles between us, we usually can come to a consensus or a solution pretty quickly. Because we're all there for each other. We all have each other's back, and we want to make something that we all can be proud of at the end of the day. So, like I said, every day is different, especially depending on what you're doing or what stage of production you're in. If you're in production, that can usually be a little more stressful actually, because you're sometimes having to find locations to shoot interviews in, and then clearing those locations and getting releases signed. Or you're trying to bring archival in and you have to get a bunch of releases signed from people who have the archival, or from news organizations, or from like law enforcement agencies, all sorts of stuff like that. Um, Sometimes you're having to write interview questions for people based on what you are envisioning the series is going to look like. Because you once you interview that person, you're kind of done. You can't really do pickups with those people again. So you kind of need to spend maybe like 2, 3, sometimes 4 hours interviewing them to cover every single base that you could for this, for example, 6 hours of show that you're going to have.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it's a lot. There's a lot of planning that goes into all of this. And like you're not just filming in like Southern California. Most of these shoots are going to be happening maybe like I know for Gypsy Rose shows, we were filming a lot in Louisiana. And that was even more different because we were filming like cinema verite. Basically, like we're kind of like a fly on the wall, just filming Gypsy and her family or her husband and just seeing like what happens. Or we know ahead of time that they want to go do a thing, like let's say they want to go to this particular restaurant or they want to go to do this particular activity. Well, now we have to clear with the owners of those places ahead of time, make sure they're all okay with it, kind of give them a timeline of when we'll be there. And it's a lot of planning. There's a lot of planning that goes into production, and then there's a lot of stuff that happens after the cameras have finished filming. So it's a lot. It's a lot that goes into it, and usually with a very quick schedule and turnaround overall.
Wow. Yeah, that's that's quite a lot. I mean, one question that I would have, and probably I'm sure our listeners are wondering, do you prefer writing versus producing and why?
So here's the thing. If we're talking about in terms of nonfiction writing, producing versus like fiction, like like prose type stuff, I will always I here's the thing. I would want to say fiction writing, but I do really like working in the nonfiction industry. And the thing that's weird about the nonfiction industry is that the producers are kind of the writers. So the term like director, there's not really a term director as far as I know, in nonfiction TV. You have a field producer, like who's out in the field, and they're the ones usually doing interviews or directing B-roll or whatever. They're kind of the go-to person when you're out doing production and filming stuff. So they're kind of the director, but they're not called a director. They're called a field producer. Whereas a story producer or a segment producer, they're the writer more or less. the showrunner, it's kind of the same as a TV showrunner. They're the one overviewing everything and kind of making sure that they know what's happening on any given time for every episode. Um, so that's why writing and producing is so tied together for nonfiction. And it is very different topics than the stuff that I write for my own fiction. But it's still, like I said, at the end of the day, it's storytelling. You need to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. You need to have emotional stakes. You need to have an overarching arc and have everything connect together in a way that feels logical and makes sense. And most importantly, keeps people engaged. Because um if something is engaging to you, my mantra is it will probably be engaging to others. And there's
Yeah.
always notes going back and forth between networks, between producers, between showrunners, and all sorts of people. There's no perfect script or no perfect story or telling when you first write the first iteration of your script. There's always going to be tons of people with notes and opinions and all sorts of stuff, and then working together you form it into something that hopefully isn't formulaic, hopefully is gonna be engaging, and hopefully is gonna stand out from, like, the crowd in terms of we're telling the same story over and over again, but how do we put our spin on it? How do we make it different so that people aren't just watching the same thing they've seen before?
So
So
it sounds like, you like both. You like doing both, right?
I do. If you had asked me a few years, if no, honestly, if you had asked me a few years
Yeah,
ago if I liked working in nonfiction, I don't know what my answer would have been. I think I had gotten so burned out. That's another reason why I took a year off from the
yeah,
industry. In addition to all the other life stuff happening, I just had to take time off because I was just so burned out. It was still like when we were kind of in lockdown and COVID quarantine. We were
right.
wondering, is the world on fire? Is the world like even going to be standing up in a few years? And obviously, we've come out the other end of all of that in some
Yeah,
ways. Um, but like remote working was so new, like no one knew what they were doing, and like we were having to keep living and working, but the world was going crazy on the outside. So, that just in addition to everything else burned me out in many ways. So like I said, I don't know if you'd asked me a few years ago if I would have said I enjoyed that as much, but honestly, I do really like being in this industry. I'm part of the Television Academy. I actually, for the last couple days, was at the inaugural event Televerse, which was basically in LA and held in the LA Live downtown LA area, and had all these different panels and workshops and screenings for just all sorts of stuff in the TV industry, from like nonfiction to scripted to variety stuff to all sorts of things. Like there were panels on how to break a story down. There were panels on acting. There was all sorts of stuff. And so that was like the more you're around people who are in this industry and just truly passionate about it, the more I'm like, yeah, I these feel like my people. And I'm glad I'm part of this wider industry because it's not just me and it's not just my little section of it. It's like all of us are in this all together.
that's
So
great.
that's helpful. It's
Yeah,
solidarity.
yeah, that's great.
so you know, essentially, you're in show business. Even though you're researching real life subjects, you still have to take that collection of facts and, like you mentioned, make it entertaining. So, like, what are some of the techniques you utilize to introduce drama and to captivate the audience?
Yeah, let me think about that. I mean, because I am not directly writing the scripts, that's left to the producers. And let me be clear, I want to be writing the scripts for these shows at some point. Like that is a thing. I've been in this industry for 9+ years. I want to be doing that at some point. But the thing that I've noticed is you need to always have a really good act out. You need to have something that's like what will drive people to want to come back and watch this. Because a lot of these shows are still put on network television where we have commercial breaks. You have to really kind of write to that. So some sort of either twist or some sort of big reveal that leaves someone being like, "Oh my goodness, I want to know what's going to happen next." Usually you'll save the biggest one of that for the end of the episode, so then they'll want to watch whatever happens next in the next episode. But you have like mini things. Like we work in unlike a film, you work in acts in a TV series. So each act kind of has its own beginning, middle, and end, but it has to tie into the act before it and the act after it. Um, and just real life is stranger than fiction in so many different ways. Um, oftentimes, like, I will read things while I'm researching where I'm like, this cannot possibly be true. This is crazy. So like one thing about Ted Bundy, and I don't think this is like a spoiler to say it, but like he not only escaped from prison once, he escaped from prison twice. Like that is crazy that that happened.
Wild. Yeah,
So
that's
like you
wild.
can't, yeah, you can't really like make stuff like that up. Like like there's so many things where I've seen biopics where someone put something in the movie and people like when watching it or doing like test audiences like would write on the cards, oh, this seemed unbelievable or this doesn't seem like and no, it's like no, that actually happened. Like this is an actual thing that happened. So real life provides a lot of different ways that like even the best screenwriters sometimes can't think of, or they'd be like that's too contrived, I can't possibly put that in there, and like no. um so it's really about
Right.
finding those kind of little nuggets of, okay, this is crazy that it happened, or this is such a wild revelation, or this is something that we've never talked about or acknowledged or revealed before about this particular topic. And it's always just about like engagement, and not engagement in the sense of like we want the numbers and we want the figures and all that sort of stuff. It's genuinely engagement of like, and when telling a story, you need to always have the question of, and then what? And then what? Because you want to know what happens after. Obviously, a story has to end at some point, but you need to keep people engaged to the point where they're like, I want to know what happens next.
Now, let me ask this, what other serial killers have you focused on, if any? Someone like, a Charlie Manson or that type?
So on for TV series, I have not. I've done other true crime stuff that are more cold case. I've actually worked on cold case files too, and those are more one-off episodes about like not usually serial killers, but people who committed crimes as a one-off to one person or maybe like a couple of people. But in my own free time, because I'm crazy, I like reading on like the subreddits for like unresolved mysteries and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Um and just kind of reading things of that nature. And I always say I don't watch a lot of true crime, but like I do tend to watch a lot of scripted TV series of detectives, like whether it's cozy stuff like Agatha Christie stuff or British stuff, or like more hard-boiled things like a lot of the Scandi noir type shows. I don't know. I just like learning about murders and true crime. It's very interesting to me. One of the novels I've not written anything for yet, but I've done a lot of research, and that probably is helping doing all of this true crime stuff, is I want to write a story about a woman who goes missing at an Indian wedding, because I've never seen that done before. I'm half Indian. Those things are giant. They've got like 500 plus people at them. I want to have a story where that happens because I think that would be fascinating, have so many different like suspects. And I think just talk about like, I don't know, a side of culture I've not really seen discussed, especially being like biracial and whatnot. So that's like my dream. If I was going to have a novel published, that's the one I would really want to write. Um, yeah, it's all tied together. There's probably a reason I like true crime in that sense.
That's
So,
awesome.
so approaching a project like that, what would your research process look like? Like, how would you go about compiling the information before you get to actually creating a script?
Sure. You mean for like the novel idea I just had, or
Right.
for that. So yeah, honestly, I would go look at like transcripts. And that I have found that's actually been really helpful even when working on the nonfiction shows that I've been on. Just looking at the way people formulate questions, the way that they answer questions. I could envision with writing a story like this, doing like not just prose writing, but also doing like literally like here is a transcript of this person being interviewed at this date by this person, and seeing it sort of that way too. I think that there's a lot of stuff in true crime that we kind of don't look at as much. So transcripts is a big one. Evidence, like evidence photos, oftentimes that are redacted, unless they're not. And I've had unredacted photos given to me before, and they are not fun to look at. Let me just say that, especially if you have no warning that they're unredacted and they're very graphic things. But in a weird way, that's also very helpful to kind of look at them and be like, all right, I'm compartmentalizing this horrible thing I'm looking at, in the sense of I'm looking at it as an objective point of view of, here's a thing and it's terrible, but I also have to empathize with it on a human level and be like, this is someone's kid, or this is someone's parent, or these clothes or these shoes or this car belonged to someone who had something horrible happen to them. Um, like I said, I think the danger of working in true crime or writing anything in true crime is you kind of get so numb to to the crimes themselves in many ways. And I kind of noticed that with myself. Like, I have a lot of people who ask me, how can you work in this? And I'm like, well, I have a therapist. So I kind of talk about this stuff anyway. Um,
Right.
like, but I am trying more actively now to kind of be like, all right, I'm not just looking at this person as a name. This is a person who had like their own lives, who had their own interests, who had their own dreams. And so applying that, it's not so much research as it is just kind of applying empathy and human connection to characters. Because oftentimes you'll only get so much from newspaper articles. That's another thing. Newspaper articles are great for learning how crimes are reported, because oftentimes you'll see the evolution of like, one body found somewhere, and then it's like two bodies, three bodies. Okay, there's a connection between all these things. All right, now we have a name for this person who's committing these crimes, but we don't know who they are. And seeing that evolution over time. Because that's another thing too. Time is a huge factor in a lot of these things. It's not usually a case of, all right, we have one person murdered, then another person, and then we find the person, and then it's done, dusted. Usually this can take like months, if not years, to
Right.
figure out what happened. And in the case of like working on these shows, it's mainly been people who were sadly killed or murdered, but I actually would focus more on people who have gone missing, because to me, I think that that is also equally interesting. Um, because why would someone go missing? What is the psychology behind that? In terms of, did they go missing of their own volition? Did they go off to start a new life? Did they actually get kidnapped? Did they, um, I don't know. There's so many other reasons. So that's something that I actually do need to actively delve deeper into, because that can cause just as much, if not more, consternation on a family than if they knew outright that they were no longer living. At least there's some definitive ending to that point. If they're missing and they don't know what happened to their family member, that can oftentimes cause a lot more trauma, and be harder for people to talk about, because it's like, well, we have no idea. We can't even think about if they're alive or dead anymore. We don't know. We don't know what has happened, and there are no answers.
Because
So,
that really brings to mind, okay, is the person being human trafficked?
mhm,
Is
yeah,
that going on? Because that would be a huge fear. Because also, I mean, not also, but usually you'll hear about people. They see a billboard with a number. Oh, are you someone who is being trafficked? And they'll call the
mhm.
number, and you'll realize, oh, this person is just a couple of blocks away. We can go and save this person.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, it's that's something I would definitely, to answer your question about research, that's something I would need to kind of approach more from that perspective. Like I said, I am in very early stages of this idea. And there's a whole lot of like, for that specific idea, I also have to kind of delve into my own culture in many ways, which I have not done as much, or as much as I would have liked in my 33 years of life. Because I grew up biracial. I'm half Indian, half white. Um, but that being said, I do not speak the language that my grandparents had growing up, in India when they were growing up. I can cook Indian food, but I don't know much about the religious side of it. I don't know much about the clothing side or the cultural, like music or movie side of it. So in that sense, I think it's an interesting perspective to maybe have a character of that ilk who's looking into this, and who's not only trying to connect with their own culture, but trying to like look into this disappearance of this person from this Indian wedding. Um, but at the same time, I also kind of would have to know a little more than I do. And thankfully, like, my grandmother has been a great source of information on that. I've recorded many conversations with her where I've just asked her like all sorts of random questions like, "Hey, what actually happens at an Indian wedding for our part of India?" And she's like just answered them and been like very helpful in that respect. So kids, listen to your elders. They have a lot of information about like all sorts of stuff that's important to listen to.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I'm also mixed race, and I know there can be like culture conflict at times. Like you don't
Hmm.
necessarily feel like like you belong anywhere. Like, have you ever come across that? Like you're
Um,
somewhat part of that, but not fully in.
a little. Like I I I always feel weird saying this in the sense of I have not outright had many outright like racist things said to me. So I've never felt like I didn't belong. I think a lot of that was just self-imposed, like that I felt like, oh no, you don't deserve to be here or something like that. And it's gotten better as I've gotten older, I would say. Like I had a kid when I was like 5 years old basically say I couldn't be friends with him because my parents were two different ethnicities, which was crazy, but it was also the early 90s, so like whatever. Um, I've had one relationship. I had a relative of that person come up to me during an event, basically asking, "Oh, what ghetto did you come from?" To which my boyfriend at the time was very embarrassed and shocked that relative said that. But like even recently, I've had like a neighbor just straight up ask me, "Are you American?" And I was like, "Yep." With my very American accent and my I was born in Virginia, like, I'm technically part Southern because my dad is from Virginia, so, I'm that is as American as you can get in some ways, so,
Yeah.
um, but I think I've just accepted over the years, like, I'm just me, and me is someone who belongs to multiple identities, whether it's like where I grew up because even grew up in DC, like I would go visit relatives in Virginia and there would be definitely a weird divide in that sense, not because of race but just like city versus more urban or urban versus like rural, that sort of thing. So there's definitely a difference and I definitely feel like I've had to wear a bunch of hats and kind of code switch in many ways throughout my life depending on what environment I'm in. How I talk to certain family members is going to be very different from how I talk to like friends or talk to my husband. Um, Over the years, though, I have tried to kind of just smooth all that out and just be like, I'm just going to talk how I talk. I'm just going to be who I am. And people will
Right.
either accept that or they won't accept that.
Bottom
Um,
line. Yeah,
yeah,
bottom line.
I think as a kid, it is harder to navigate those sort of feelings of identity. And once you get older, especially like once I hit my 30s, I'm like, it doesn't matter as much. Like now I just feel like I'm me. People will accept me or not, and I'm cool. Like no matter what. Like I'm I I'm just who I am. And that's fun. Like we're having fun is the best way to look at it at the end of the day.
Yeah, and you had mentioned diversity,
Mhm.
speaking of LA, LA can be kinda compartmentalized or kinda divided, but downtown LA is very, very mixed,
Mhm.
as is Hollywood.
Mhm. Absolutely, yes. The weirdest thing, culture shock that I've actually experienced since being here, which I kind of experienced on the on the East Coast when I was still living there, but a lot of people have come up to me thinking that I am Hispanic. And I'm like, I took Spanish in high school. I do not speak it very well. So they like come up
Yeah.
to me speaking Spanish, and I'm like, I'm
Right,
sorry. I know I'm
right.
a brown skinned person, but I don't speak Spanish. I'm sorry. Um, and just like, I don't know, I guess I dress a little differently than people here do. So like I'll be at the laundromat and I'll have like these very well-meaning, like usually Hispanic or Asian people like looking at me being like, what is this very tall person who's like, I'm not that tall. I'm only 5'4", but like compared to them, I'm very tall. And they're like looking at me being like, what are you doing? Like wearing your like boots and your like flowy t-shirts and stuff like that. And I'm just like, hi, hello, I'm just here living and doing laundry. So
Yeah.
so in that sense, yeah, and, like, I don't know, I've always had the game like, I don't really get offended if people get my ethnicity wrong or, like, whatever. I've made it into a game at this point where I've been like, "Guess, just guess what my ethnicity is." Because I don't know. It's at the end of the day, as long as you treat me like I'm just a human being and I'm me, then there's not much you can say to really offend me. I'm pretty chill about that sort of thing.
Yeah, psychologically, it seems like, you're really well adjusted, like you're not easily offended, and even dealing with some of the subject matters. It seems like you found a way not to let this stuff affect you, because I know psychologically, seeing gruesome photos and things of that nature, that can have like a depressing effect on a lot of people.
Oh, absolutely. Like whenever I have told people I've worked in true crime, their first two reactions without fail are, "Oh my goodness, that is so cool. I watch true crime all the time." And then the second reaction is, "Do they pay for your therapy?" And I'm like, "No, they don't." But like yeah, I don't know. Like I think the fact that I have a mother who was not like every other mother. She's a very outspoken, very um n- nerdy. Like both my parents are kind of nerdy in their own ways, and I am, as a result, I'm a little nerd myself. I'm into many fandoms and all sorts of fan type stuff. But like she and my dad would like literally have me sit on their lap and they would watch Star Trek Next Generation when I was a kid. Like my mother is into like horror films and fantasy stuff and sci-fi, and like I don't know, I grew up with that sort of stuff. I grew up with probably things I shouldn't have watched at an early age, but I did, because they were like, you're mature enough. You can watch this." So, I don't know, and, like, my mother's an avid reader, so at an age, like, 7, I was already reading chapter books and, like, probably reading chapter books that might not have been age appropriate, but, like, for me, they've stuck with me, and I don't know, I've always just liked things that are a little darker, a little more, edgy, and not for, like, shock value or anything like that. I kind of hate when things are done just for shock value, just for the sake of, like, let me gross you out or have a reaction that's very visceral. I don't know, I get a sort of catharsis from it, if that makes sense. I don't mind things that are cozy and comfy and, like, just there to make you kind of feel good, but I myself am, at the end of the day, gonna be drawn to things that are a little more pushing the envelope. And so that's probably why I can stomach it a little better in true crime. Um, my one line, though, is that I can't stand stuff happening to animals. I'm a huge fan of animals, and, like, I've grown up
Yeah.
with animals my whole life, and, like, the instant I know that something bad is gonna happen to an animal in a film or a book or something like that, I'm like, "I'm out. I can't. I can't do that." That's too much for me. People, sure,
So,
like, yeah, but
uh,
animals, no. Mhm.
let me ask, have you seen that true crime, The Staircase?
I have heard of it. That's the one where,
Netflix.
yeah, the man the man said his wife fell down the staircase because of an owl, I think.
Or something, but yeah, a lot of
Yeah.
people think, she was pushed.
Yes, yeah. I have not watched it. I think there was like a docuseries and a scripted fictional, not scripted as a narrative, like series about it. I've not watched that one. It's on the list because I've heard like all my family members have seen that and are like, "You would love this," and I'm like, "All right, I will add it to my very never-ending list of things that I need to see." I literally have like so many recommendations from people, and I take forever to get to them. I'm terrible at it.
Yeah, because you mentioned true crime, and my
Hmm.
sister is super into true crime, and she basically made me, me and my mom were like, I don't really like this stuff that much. But my sister was like, okay, no, you have to watch The Staircase. You have to watch The
Hmm.
Staircase. So I did, and I did find it pretty interesting, but a little dark at the same time.
Definitely. And like I do agree that there is a little bit of an exploitative nature that can come out with true crime. And thankfully, like I've never worked on a show where I feel like we're doing that on our production or on our team. But even definitely like some scripted true crime shows, I'm like, this feels a little gratuitous, especially because a lot of the crimes happen to women and a lot of stuff like in that sense it's like, wow, let's see how much we can torture or abuse this woman. And obviously like there's men that happen to too, but like I will often see it happening more so to women on these scripted shows, and I'm like, it's always like a young woman, it's always a woman who's like in a vulnerable position of some kind. And I'm like, we seem to have this trope in true crime. I kind of want to
Yeah.
avoid that if I do anything of my own making. Because not only just because because of that, but it's a little tired. Like, it's a little like after a while, you're like, all right, change the story. Like, how can we throw this on its head and make it a different take on it?
Awesome. So yeah, we're kind of getting to the top of the hour. Did
Sure.
you, Brian? Did you have any closing questions?
Yeah, definitely. I would ask, just for our listeners who might be interested in getting into true crime or video production or writing or, any of the various things we've been talking about tonight. Someone who is young, they're very green in the industry, or maybe they're just straight out of high school, straight out of college. What would be the number one tip you would give them for breaking into the industry?
Oh my goodness, number one tip.
Number one
Because
tip, yeah.
yeah, um, I mean, it's kind of the tried and true thing, but you need to build your network. And like, there's no right. Let me preface that by saying there is no right way to do that. Um, I can't remember if like I came up with this or if I heard someone say this at one point, but luck in this industry, because you do kind of need it to succeed in this industry. You can make your own luck in that sense, in the sense of, if you have the right connections, if you are at the right place at the right time, then you're in that position where you can do something or make it happen. If you do, and that doesn't necessarily mean it's even going to succeed, but you absolutely will fail 100% if you don't try anything whatsoever. So building your network, and that can be a number of ways. Maybe you know someone in your real life, or someone in your real life knows someone who could connect you in some way, even if it's just like the smallest little way. Anything that can get you advice or experience is super helpful. Look at different production companies around your area. This is a really messy time right now, as I said, but there's always production companies looking to hire someone, whether it's as an intern starting at the bottom or a production assistant. Just get yourself out there one way or another, and you will find people. And I'm an introvert, but most people in this industry I found are introverts. Like, but like, we all will work together because we know we're all in this together. And you will build your network that way. I would also recommend, because I have had this happen to me, reach out to people on LinkedIn. Honestly, I have had so many people reach out from my graduate school, from just people I don't even know how they found me, but they'll message me on LinkedIn and be like, "Hey, how did you get into this industry? How have you succeeded as a woman of color, or just a woman, or a person of color, or just how have you got into true crime?" And I'm like, "All right, let me talk with you." And usually I try to make it a point to have like maybe like a Zoom call with them and kind of get their backstory, see if I can connect them with any one of my own network. I can't guarantee anything, like I've said to before, but even just one person knowing their name, or knowing that they exist or they have these skills, is the difference between like maybe getting a job or not getting a job. So definitely don't be afraid to reach out to people, like just cold calling, maybe not cold call, but cold emailing, cold messaging,
Yeah,
um, and
right.
doing stuff like that. I would say a caveat though, don't like write a full-length novel in your email. Like, just keep it short and sweet. Like, say who you are, what you're interested in, what you like about the person that you're reaching out to. And just kind of keep it authentic and keep it natural and go from there. Because most people are not scary. If someone doesn't get back to you, they probably weren't worth reaching out to begin with. Um,
Yeah,
and one, if you
absolutely.
yeah, and if you reach out to enough people, I guarantee there's gonna be at least one person who will get back to you. And maybe that won't lead ultimately to anything or anywhere where you can get a job, but you never know unless you try. Um, I've been in the experience where I have reached out to a number of people before, and they have not gotten back to me. So that's why I'm very, very gung ho about okay, if someone does reach out to me, I will do my best to get back to them in some form or another, see if I can help them, see if I can do something to maybe like give them a little hope about this industry that seems to be floundering at the moment.
Yeah,
Because it's a constantly changing landscape right now. I was saying to my husband the other day, like, the last 20 to 25 years of TV, scripted and unscripted, have changed more than the 20 to 25 years before that. like the landscape has changed so much. The way we deliver shows and the type of shows we're doing, how we make shows, it's all changed and it's constantly changing. So I would say, like, have people who also are in the know about sorts of things. It's good to have people who are at your level and maybe getting in around the same time too, so you can encourage each other and kind of like keep tabs on like what jobs are happening or what's happening in the industry. But
Right.
knowing people who have been doing this for far longer than you, who are kind of like either mentors or teachers or people you can look up to who have done this for maybe 10, 20, 30 years, that's super valuable too. And the more you work with people, the more jobs you have, the more you'll be able, hopefully, to meet those sorts of people. Um, Now, I will also say the caveat is most people, I would say, if you reach out to them right now, they're probably going to have a similar story of work is very hard to get. Like, don't even think about trying to get in this industry. And I would say,
Yeah, right.
yes, question mark, but also no. Like, you should still try. Like, maybe have another thing that you're doing on the side to make sure that you are financially stable and that emotionally you're okay. But like, just even if you reach out to one person a day, like find one person and craft a really solid message or email. Um, you never know what's going to happen. Like, lean on your people. It's not weird in this industry to just text someone out of the blue that you know and be like, "Hey, wanted to check in. Do you want to grab a coffee? Do you have any like jobs that you've heard of on the horizon?" Like, we're all, like I said, we're all in this together. We all want to support each other as much as possible. So, as an introvert, I hate myself saying this because it just proves my parents right, but you got to build your network and you got to make friends. You got to kind of hustle in that sense. So that's my number one tip, I would say. The rest will follow because you can learn stuff on the job. You can learn the jargon. You can learn how to do all of this um one way or another. Like, I had to do so much trial by fire stuff. I was given stuff that I did not expect to do when on my first job being an associate producer. But like, I got through it. And there's going to be tough times. You might feel burned out. If you do, hopefully you're working with people who understand you need to be a human being and like take breaks too. That's another thing. Work with people who are actually human beings. Don't work with people who are going to
Yes.
be like just working you like a workhorse and just like working you for 12, 16-hour days without breaks or anything like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, we definitely appreciate you coming on the show, and whenever
Of
you want to come
course.
back, let us know, and we'll get you back booked.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. I was worried I would not have enough to say, but clearly I spoke enough for an hour. So you all asked really good questions. I appreciate that. And I
Thank
appreciate
you.
getting the chance to kind of talk about this side of the industry from this perspective. So thank you so much.
Yeah, I think it gives our listeners a nice kind of 360 view on things, which maybe not too often they're told. So I think it's a great perspective to put out there.
So
Absolutely.
before we get out of here, where can our audience find you at?
Oh my goodness. I just said be on social media and I'm terrible at social media. If you search Reshma Patricia Crawford, Reshma Patricia Crawford, I'm on Instagram, I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Facebook, I'm on IMDb. um, I'm now on Tumblr. I used to have like private, I still do have private Tumblr accounts, but I now have like a mini website I'm trying to build. So yeah, I'm kind of on all the socials for the most part. I'm not great at posting periodically, but I will try to get better at it. But yeah, just check me out, hit me up. Like, I'm chronically online despite not being good at social media. So if you send me an email, like, or send me a message, I will most likely try and respond within like a few days. So yeah, hit me up. I like having conversations with people.
That's awesome.
Awesome. And we'd like to thank everybody for tuning in.